people love to talk about themselves. Just inviting someone out to lunch saying, hey, I am really interested in what you do in your career path. I just wanted to pick your brain and see kind of how you got where you are.
So, on today's episode, we have Adarious Payton, who is at Miller Coors, a really good friend of mine. We actually went to college together. Adarious, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's hot, but other than that, all is well. I can't complain. I'm in good health. Job is stable. So, those small wins are big in the times we're in now. So I'm grateful.
Definitely. And then we also have my co-host for today's episode, Julian Razo. Julie, you want to say what's up to the people?
How you guys doing? Excited for today.
What school do you go to? Tell them a little bit about yourself real quick.
Yeah, so I go to Xavier University in Cincinnati. I am a marketing major with minors in business analytics and Spanish. Right now I am the marketing intern for DIM Events. It's up and coming, so excited to see where it goes in the future.
Dope. Look at y'all diversifying the intern pool, man. That's what's up. The nasty natty in the building.
Yes, sir.
I love it.
Nasty natty.
So Adarious, let's chat a little bit about, can you just tell us what your current role is at Miller Coors so people can kind of just get an idea of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I work in sales technology. So my official title is Associate Technology Manager. Essentially there, I work as kind of like a liaison between our commercial organization. So think like marketing, sales, et cetera, et cetera. So anyone that touches the customer side of the business, and then IT. So IT very much so, information technology. I work in tandem with both groups to get funding for projects. So if the sales organization is saying, hey, we would like to enhance our CRM system, for example, I would go, okay, let me know exactly what you need. So I would get the requirements for it. And then I would then help write the business case so that IT can go and fund the project.
Can you explain what CRM means for a lot of these people that aren't in marketing?
Absolutely. So CRM is a customer relationship management tool. So basically it is a central location for you to archive all your interactions with customers. So one that's really popular is Salesforce.com. Oracle used to be really popular once upon a time, but Salesforce has kind of dominated the market because they have a out the box platform that can be accessed from the website. So you don't need the same servers and all that other stuff you used to need back in the day.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. And yeah, I think before we even jump deeper into this conversation, the reason for this podcast that we created, Anyone Have a Map, is really to talk about the different career fields that are out there, right? When me and you were in college, we were kind of in the same boat where we didn't really know which direction we wanted to go into, and life kind of takes you down these different paths and pushes you into a career field or an experience that you really begin to love, you didn't even know existed. And I think that's the cool thing and unique aspect. So, but this is a tool so we can, share the stories of different people in different career fields with our interns, but then also with those who are just looking for jobs and interested in careers. And I think this is a good person to start with, one of my best friends. And I think his experience will talk a lot about the journey that he's gone through. But yeah, I'm gonna kick it off to Julian, and we can start with that.
Cool. So what do you feel like is your current impact on the world?
Oh wow, y'all getting deep. So one of the things that I've been naturally kind of good at, really is two things, is engaging people. So being able to walk up to virtually anyone and start a conversation. And then the second thing that I've always has kind of found me is leadership opportunities. So from kindergarten line leader to Boy Scout troop leader to, being involved on a varsity lacrosse team, having a leadership role there, in a sport where there wasn't a lot of African Americans playing in it, and then going off to college and being a leader in my fraternity chapter as well as our broader organization. I've kind of coupled those things together to really empower people to achieve more. So together, the collective can always achieve more than an individual output. And so, that's kind of been the foundational rule that I've kind of lived by, is just figuring out how do we get this diverse set of people from different parts of the world, with different perspectives, and pull out the best in everybody. And it looks different. Like the way you pull the best out of Mo may not be the same way that you pull it out of you, Julian. And so, as leaders and as future leaders, knowing that kind of one fundamental truth, I think it'll pay dividends in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned leadership. So I know like a lot of universities, they have organizations. You mentioned your fraternity. I'm also involved in a fraternity as well, Phi Iota Alpha, which hold the presidency. But like, how important do you think leadership is, in the real world? You mentioned like initiating conversations. It's like, how do you go about that with your leadership skills?
I think it's really important. I think those positions that we hold in student-led organizations in undergrad often don't get the respect that they should. Because if you think about it, as fraternity chapter president, like you're creating events, then you're funding those events, then you're executing those events, and you're marketing those events, which is very much so what you might end up doing in the professional world. So you're already having a supplemental place for you to test out things you're learning in the classroom. So if you go into one of your marketing classes and they teach you about, tactics to use social media marketing, you immediately can go apply those concepts to the organization that you're involved in and see if it actually works or if it should be tweaked just based upon, time. It moves so quickly. So those roles are critically important because when you get to the real world, you don't necessarily get to choose who your manager is. And so your manager's leadership style may be something that you are not accustomed to. So having those foundational leadership skills, you at least have like a base self-starter kit that can at least enable you to start activating something. So it's like, all right, I know I was chapter president and this worked. Let me try from there to see if it'll work here. And if not, at least I have a baseline that I can tweak off of going forward. So I think it's very important.
I totally agree with you, honestly. I would say like a lot of people are shy to, kind of uphold those positions of like a lot of responsibility and stuff. But I feel like what comes with leadership is courage. And like, it takes a lot of courage to kind of step in and, be in like such a role where you have to influence a lot of individuals, your executive board and everything. But I think that's what carries you to be like, one of the top executives in a company, Fortune 500. I would say, yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's interesting that you mentioned is talking a lot about working with people, right? And that seems to be something that you're really good at, right? You're pulling things out of people and making sure we're able to get to one common goal. How much of that was something that you just inherently had, or was that something that you learned through maybe college or high school? What did that look like for you?
Part of it was genetic. So my mother, she was also very personable, had great interpersonal skills. My grandmother calls it the gift of gab, if you will. So I did get some of that from her, but conversely, obviously through various life experiences, you start to refine those things. So, early on in my formative years when I was in school, like obviously you can't always be out engaging people. Like at some point, you got to put your head down and actually let folks do work. So just learning the kind of ebbs and flows of that. And then as I got older, more mature, went through college, and now my career, I'm in leadership positions at work, and my tenure, I've been there for 6 years, but I'm not like a people manager. I'm not a senior director. I'm not a executive, but I lead our African American employee resource group. And so, though I don't have the actual, I guess, corporate title, I am able to leverage my relationships to go to different brand teams and go, hey, we want to do this awesome program. We don't have the funding. Can we count on Blue Moon, Coors Light, and Red's Apple Ale to pitch in, $3,000 a piece to help underwrite some of the costs? or, being able to have conversations with our VP of communications just recently and go, hey, we put out a statement about the current events, and I think we missed the mark on a couple areas. Here's why. And those relationships enable those conversations. So even though I'm not the most tenured person, I don't have the big title, I still am able to have an impact just because I'll talk to anybody, and I'm willing to build those relationships.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you're a part of the African American Leadership Group.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, how important is diversity in the workspace, and like how does that implement in in being progressive with your projects and funding and everything?
It's very important. There are countless studies done by the most world-renowned professional organizations and for-profit entities in the world, like Deloitte, McKinsey, et cetera, those who have identified themselves as thought leaders kind of in the business world. And it shows that, your revenue generally, I want to say on average, there's a 19% increase in your revenue when you have a diverse leadership team, a diverse talent pool, because it spurs more innovation. You're not sitting thinking about the standard management theory. You're talking to people who may be brown or black who have done a lot with a little for a very long time. And they may be able to give you ideas for how you can grow your brand that don't require a whole lot of resources. And now you're seeing the financial return based upon the tactics that you use. So it's very important. It's something that a lot of companies are now being forced to take seriously. And I'm really optimistic and hopeful for what the business world looks like, 5-10 years down the line after we've seen some of these efforts start to materialize.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. And let's take a step backwards. Let's talk about that transition from college to the actual career, right? Because, I'm a little biased. I know what that looked like for you, but there was a lot of pressure, one from your family, probably just as much as like my family, where it's like, if you want to stay in Chicago, you have to get a job, right? You can't just stay in Chicago and hang out. So what was that journey like for you? Because I remember career fairs. I remember all of those things happening. Did you utilize a lot of that?
Yeah, I would say, for me, because I am so good at engaging, my number one tactic for getting a job is going to career fairs. Once I can get past the robotic apply here, if you don't have certain buzzwords, you automatically get the rejection email. Once I can talk to a recruiter or a representative from the company and start talking about my ideas, talking about, what I want to accomplish, the value I can bring to an organization, more often than not, especially compared to just applying online, I'm going to at least get, a phone screen or an in-person interview to help, potentially get me that employment. And that transition, you're right, it was a lot of pressure, right? So, that pressure, especially when you go to school out of state, is on you from day one. It's like, if you don't get the grades, you don't perform, like now you got to be embarrassed because you got to go back home. And everyone's going to be asking, all right, you've been in Chicago, like what you doing back here? So that pressure was certainly there, and it was scary, honestly, trying to transition from being in school to the workplace. I had no idea I will end up in the alcoholic beverage industry. Coming up, I thought maybe I'd do banking or go into like some type of public sector, like government, et cetera, et cetera. And fortunately, it all worked out.
Nice. And you mentioned, going to a lot of these career fairs and stuff. How important is it to kind of establish a network, especially for like, someone that doesn't go to school in state, like say Chicago? I know I go to school in Cincinnati. However, I'm from Chicago, so I come here for the summer. So for me, I would say a lot of the networking I do is in Cincinnati, and I wouldn't say I would want or I find myself a future in Cincinnati. What would you say, for someone that's like my age, 21, what kind of advice would you give them if they did not go to school in state and they went to school out of state? How do you establish that network?
Yeah, I think what we're learning now through this pandemic is that location really doesn't matter. There are still Fortune 500 entities that are running seamlessly and we're all at home remote. So I wouldn't necessarily discount anything due to geographic location, but what I would do is encourage folks to be very strategic and intentional about the relationships they have. I know for us, especially when we're a lot younger, we want to see our actions materialize quickly so we can get validation that what we're doing is the right thing. Because if it's not, we want to course correct immediately, which I don't think there's a problem with, but we have to make sure that we're intentional. So networking is, my boy always says networking is one letter away from not working. So basically what he means by that is you have to make sure that when you reach out to people, you're genuine, you leverage a contact that may be mutual or a mutual interest. So like if you're a student at Ohio State and you're trying to meet someone that is an alum of the University of Michigan, throw that in there, throw that little joke in there, because then you can establish some type of commonality and some type of humanity, and they won't think that you just Googled intro email example and just change some words around and press send. So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece is just being open-minded to opportunities. I know for me, I had wanted to stay in Chicago, but there was obviously a ton of opportunity back home in the Bay Area. I mean, that's the tech mecca, banking mecca. I mean, there are so many industries out there that thrive, startup companies, just the whole spectrum. And I could tell you I was not interested in going back home at all. And now sometimes I wonder, like, if I had been in a situation where I went back home, how would that have turned out? So awesome. I would say just, also being open and flexible too.
Definitely.
And let's get into your first role, because I know you've been one of those people that I know who's been consistent at their job and utilize building a network in your career field or at your specific job to get up and climb the corporate ladder, right? So let's talk about that first role. How did you utilize that first role to get to that next role that you worked hard to?
Yeah, so my first role, so one thing that I've appreciated about where I work currently is that it's enabled me to get a very broad skill set. So very rarely do you hear someone go from sales to business analytics to like this now hybrid IT role. Like it's very difficult to switch from function to function, even though a lot of companies will tell you, oh, we promote from within, we really want to make sure that our internals can grow their career. That's usually the case, but going from function to function is very difficult because there's a different skill set needed for all three of those functions. So my first role was in sales. I was in outside sales. I can't say that I was looking to go into sales when I first got out of undergrad because there's this stigma about sales, especially as you get your senior year of college. Folks like, I'm not really trying to do sales because of the pressure to deliver. So I did that for a while. I started connecting with folks that were at the company that looked like me, that were either in corporate roles or in other parts of the country. And then I just started to develop that network. And they started inviting me out to the African American Employee Network events and other events and activations that were happening around the city that were for Black folks. And that's how I started meeting people. And then I got that kind of trusted ecosystem of folks that looked like me. And then I just scaled it and branched it out to other folks. So like I'm a member of our Hispanic ERG. I support our LGBTQ organization. So just going from various pockets of the population. And not only are people that identify as that group in those groups, but there are also allies in that group. So there are folks that, identify as Caucasian that are an African American Employee Network, but support the community and want to be allies. So it just kind of just spirals. And word of mouth, it's just the best form of marketing. Once you start to get a little bit of a brand behind yourself, it starts to trickle pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And with that, did you go into any specific projects? I know right here in your bio, it says that you're currently working on a overhaul project or technology overhaul project. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically without getting too technical and in the weeds, we recently launched a CRM system, so customer relationship management tool for our internal sales force about 3 years ago. So 2017, which is very late in the game, right? Companies have had CRMs for years, especially large enterprises like Now it's called Molson Coors, but formerly known as Miller Coors. Right, a $14 billion enterprise in revenue a year. Like you would think that there would be a CRM system. Well, recently, how our industry is set up, we actually don't sell beer, which is kind of weird, right? You're like, you're a beer company. Well, we brew it and then we sell it to a distribution network that actually goes to a store like Jewel and sells the beer, just due to legality. So now we scaled that CRM. So now that our distribution network is also on there. So on top of our 300 sales employees, we now have 6,000 external sales users that are now on that CRM system. And that became available as of June 14th. And so our team was on that project from start to finish. We worked in tandem with an organization by the name of Accenture, which is a management consultancy. They helped us work with a team of developers offshore to build a separate portal that all 6,000 of those users could use. And that, kid you not, took a lot out of me. Because you got folks in India, they're on a different time zone. So it was 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, hello. They're like, it's lunchtime over here. I'm like, it's not lunchtime over here. Call me back. But we initially, we eventually got it done. And it gave me so much exposure to the project side and kind of how you deliver something in a function like IT, which is very black and white, very process driven. How do you deliver something from point A all the way to point Z? It looks a lot different working with IT than it does for marketing, for example. Like with marketing, you can do a little bit more off the cuff. We don't wing it a little bit. But with the IT folks, it don't work like that.
Yeah. And to pull it back a little bit, you talked about these employee resource groups and you talked a lot about networking as you kind of navigated throughout Miller Coors, right? Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I always notice from a lot of interns and a lot of people that we do these events with, that younger generation, is what does networking look like, right? Not everybody is comfortable with networking. Not everybody knows what networking looks like. And sometimes I tell them, like, networking can simply just be like sitting down and having coffee with somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's not always a instant transactional relationship that you're trying to build. You should look to build a long-term relationship with them. So
absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about how you went about networking, like specifics, right? Because I think that is really helpful to like give people some easy tools on how to network as you're growing in a company or just networking outside of your job and trying to prepare for that first career move.
Absolutely. So we have a couple of cheat codes at my job. We have a bar on the 16th floor. So almost anyone is willing to have a beer with you after work, after a long day, and just chat. So that was a resource I used. To Mo's point, getting coffee, grabbing lunch. That's obviously something that folks want to do in Chicago. It's a food-forward city. Just inviting someone out to lunch saying, hey, I am really interested in what you do in your career path. I kind of LinkedIn stalked you and saw you had done these roles prior. I just wanted to pick your brain and see kind of how you got where you are. People love to talk about themselves. So they will likely oblige and tell you everything that you want to know. And then third, I would say view it as you building the ecosystem, right? So some relationships will materialize very quickly and others will take some refining and pruning, if you will, in order for you to get it to where you want to be. So don't think just because someone is in the same level role as you or a more junior role than you that, it's not beneficial to network with them, because what you'll find very quickly in your career is it's not linear. It does not look like this. Like our CEO just told us the other day, he took a ton of laterals, even took some demotions before he even got to where he wanted to go. And the value in those lateral moves and those steps back is if you're going to a different function, so from like marketing to finance, for example, you're broadening your skill set so you at least have more business acumen, and it can empower you as an executive to understand how those functions work.
Interesting. And so you said like people kind of change fields from marketing to finance, and like for someone that's like majoring in marketing or say even finance, I mean, what does that like kind of transition look from like different fields of like, business? How can someone even like, go about that?
Yeah, so it's tough. I mean, it varies by organization. I will say the good thing about a lot of those roles is even in marketing, people often misinterpret it. I think it's just making commercials and designing packages and like all the sexy stuff. But marketing is also incredibly analytical. Like you get all these consumer reports, you get focus groups, and you get just kind of how the industry is going. So you can develop a base level of analytical skills in marketing, get savvy in Excel, and then you can apply that to finance. So you may not know the language of finance, but you at least know data. You know how to interpret data. You know how to mine insights from data. And that is what's going to equip you to be a really good finance analyst or whatever the role may be. So just making sure that when you have these various roles, regardless of the function, that you're at least getting a base level skill set that's transferable to different parts of the organization.
Cool. Thank you.
And one thing that people should know about you is you're a very busy man, right? You co-chaired the 100 Black Men of America toy drive, and I've been to it, which has been a great time every single year, and it just continues to grow and grow, and I always bring people with me. And then you're on the executive board for the DePaul Black Alumni, right? So, and you're consistently growing throughout your company, right? And climbing that corporate ladder, and then you're outside in employee resource group. So I think one thing is trending and very interesting is this idea of self-care, right? So what do you do to take care of yourself? Because like, I know for a lot of people, all of those things might have just given them a headache or just like anxiety, right? So what do you do in that space?
Yeah, so I have to give credit where credit is due. So my girlfriend actually has, from day one, always pushed wellness in general. So like eating right, being active, make sure you're getting adequate amounts of sleep, making sure you're going to the doctor at least once a year, or going to a doctor that can provide you the type of robust care that you need so you can know what's going on with your body. So in 2020, and Mo, I've talked to you about this, I started going to therapy. And initially I got hit with a roadblock because I was like, man, I got this type of insurance coverage. I can't afford this dude that I want to go to. But then Mo was like, well, there's a sliding scale option. And I was like, yeah, like, let me not try to talk myself out of this. Let me take it seriously and see how it goes. And quite honestly, therapy and more recently journaling has how I've been taking care of myself. And I've now developed a mindset that if anything impacts my wellness, so my diet, my activity level, my motivation, my sleeping pattern, it needs to be addressed, whether it's anxiety, whether it's me being overwhelmed, or me being in an emotional, vulnerable spot just from what's happening around us. It has to be discussed. And coping mechanisms need to be identified.
Definitely. And with self-care, I think one thing that's interesting, and I don't know if you've done this analysis, but do you think you're able to navigate your career a lot smoother since you've implemented these new tools, or would you say it's kind of the same as you were before?
Yeah, I would say there's been a moderate difference in between how I handled the stress of career pre-therapy versus now. Like a lot of stuff that my coworkers will get worked up about. I won't say I don't care, but like it just doesn't. I just know that like it's not my cross to bear, right? Like at some point, like I've exhausted my energy. I've done what I can do. I've controlled what I can control, and so outside of that, I don't get worked up about it. During the project I was just telling you about, as you can imagine, there were tons of roadblocks. We had to learn a new work stream management methodology, which is called Agile, which I won't get into. But that was different for us, so it felt weird. We're all type A individuals, but like, I was not about to let that project stress me out. Like I knew that what they needed me to get done, I was going to get done. And I honestly stepped in and saved a couple things just because I had been an analyst before. Like I knew the data and I knew how to navigate it. I knew the language. So I was able to actually save some things. But like I wasn't losing no sleep over that project. And so I largely attributed to therapy, to journaling, just having a spot where I can get my thoughts off and let that be it.
Now, is this like for the self-care, is it like every day kind of thing, or is this like once a week?
The cadence varies. It honestly varies based upon my emotion. I will say therapy, since I was new starting out, me and my therapist actually bumped heads on this initially. She wanted me to go weekly, and I'm like, look, I'm trying to go bi-weekly and ease my way into it. And I'm glad I actually ended up not being so stubborn or listening to her recommendation, because they call it maintenance therapy, but it's certainly something that needs to be prioritized. So that was something that was a weekly cadence. And once the pandemic hit, we started doing it, virtually, obviously. Journaling, I haven't gotten on a cadence just yet. It just depends on how I'm feeling. Like some days I just want to write, other days I don't. And I've come to realize that for me, when it comes to communicating emotion, romantic relationships, platonic relationships, it feels better when I write it. So I can get my thought off uninterrupted. I can express myself. I can leverage some creativity. Whereas in person, there's more distractions. There's the TV on. How's their body language? What's their tone like? Like you're trying to decipher how they're interpreting the message versus when you're writing it. Again, you're just getting your thoughts off. So that's been really helpful for me. But I also do want to get better at the verbal expression as well. It'll come.
And with that, so what are you doing now as far as like, I know you mentioned your project, but like in the workplace and stuff like that, like, is that all just like every single day, like, grind, like, project and work and then project, or is it like, do you have certain days for, work and like projects and stuff?
Yeah, so now that I'm actually done with school and I'm not working full time and going to school full time, I do have a little bit more leisure time. And naturally, like my body, like the kind of thinker I am, like some people think I'm crazy. Like I need cognitive stimulation at all times. So like when I'm not in school, I could crank through like 2 books a week. Like it's crazy.
Oh, wow.
But I'm starting to pump the brakes because again, my girlfriend has been like, yo, like you need to just chill, like watch some TV, do nothing, like turn your brain off for a little bit so you don't like work yourself to death. So that's been a focus now. I have been at work just due to current events, engaging with our senior leadership team a bit more. So we are doing a anti-racism event in a couple weeks that I proposed, and some fellow DePaul alum who are now in the mental health space are going to come and facilitate that workshop. So that's been dope. But they've been calling me, asking me perspective on this. What should we do next? Which is nice, but it's also draining because I ain't getting paid for that. And then finally, I'm working on a confidential project in wake of the current events on economic empowerment. So that's been one of my passion points for a very long time, just figuring out how do certain communities who have not had access to wealth get the wealth that they need to where the playing field is a little bit more leveled. So more to come on that. Once it's public, I'll be sure to give Demi Events the exclusive.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I mean, hey, I definitely would like to see where that project goes for sure, especially because it's giving back to the community. And I feel like, everyone should, like, at some point, give back to the community. My mom always says, like, it takes a village to raise a man. So,
absolutely.
Just, being able to give back to the village, I commend you for that. So, awesome.
Yeah. And I think for you, right, we've learned so much where, you've always, I think, and I'm biased on this, and I've seen the growth in you, and because of that growth, you've helped so many other people grow, and you're really a people's person, right? You always know how to interact with people and help utilize their strengths or their weaknesses to better themselves, right? Would you say that's something that you pride yourself on a consistent basis, and you continue to just always give back without looking to receive something as well?
Yeah, I do. In all transparency, once upon a time, particularly like in my undergrad years, I did see relationships as a little more transactional. So I would often evaluate things in life and people and try to figure out, okay, what am I giving versus what they're getting? And I took a step back from that because it's not transactional, right? It's not as black and white. I've still kind of leaned into that ability to engage various people because now my thought is what I put out is going to come back to me, right? And so it may not necessarily come back from that individual, but it's going to come back from somewhere. And so now that I'm confident in that, I'm not even cognizant of it. It's, it's better. I feel better when I give something versus when I get it. I just do. Like when I'm able to put people on, like case in point with the event, the anti-racism event, our peers from DePaul initially came on to our Wellness Wednesday chat for free. And they usually get upward of $200-300 an hour for that. So once I was able to get buy-in from senior leadership to get them compensated handsomely, that felt great. I'm like, you know what? I appreciate y'all. Like, y'all didn't have to do that. Let me reciprocate and make sure that y'all get the opportunity to be adequately compensated for what y'all about to do, because this content is going to be life-changing for some folks. And that's how I've been selling it. So that's pretty much my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up on this episode, right? One of the reasons why Adarious is the first person that we have on this podcast is because he's consistently supported them events from the time that it was nobody really doing much and we just did things here and there. Adarious always was there helping out with events or like co-leading events or leading events and trying to come up with business models, and this helped us no matter what we needed, right? So complete honor to have you on the podcast. You paved the way.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
These interns that don't even know who you are, but you've literally been one of the main reasons why this has continued to go. And we want to give you your flowers while you're still here and make sure to honor you in that space. And yeah, where can people find you, right? If they, get your followers up, if they want to connect and learn a little bit more about some of the projects you're working on or figure out ways on how to network in their career, where can people find you?
For sure. So on Twitter and Instagram, the @ handle is Adarious Go Get It. The Go Get It brand is very much so still alive. So you can find me on both those channels there. LinkedIn is just Adarious Payton. Feel free to, add me on LinkedIn, as well as, Facebook. I engage with complete strangers all the time. So don't feel afraid to reach out or mention or send me an article or something. That's honestly how you start building relationships. It's just commenting on stuff and showing that you have a genuine interest in a particular subject matter. So with me, if you talk about something finance related, economy related, entrepreneur related, I'm probably going to respond. Even when it's a time I'm not supposed to be on the phone, during quiet hours, I'll probably still respond. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
I'll make sure to send you a quick DM for sure after this.
For sure.
Connect with you.
Anything else before we wrap up, Julian?
Would you like to give any advice to any college students, especially with this whole coronavirus thing and the job market soon to be competitive? Any advice out there that you just would like to give for the people that are graduating in 2021?
Yeah, so my advice is actually relatively straightforward. I think this particular class, 2020, 2021, 2022, they are going to be the generation that's going to shift the world as we know it. Like I have all the confidence in the world that they are going to come, be bold, be vocal, and they're going to challenge the status quo. And so I just want to encourage you all to keep doing that. You all have been very vocal. You all have also set trends already. I know folks give a lot of credit to the millennials, but Gen Z for sure has some serious buying power as well as social acumen that you have at your disposal. And then I also want to encourage you because, excuse my French, but this shit not going to be easy, right? There are very much so still systems in place that, predate all of us for centuries. And shaking that table is going to be uncomfortable, but I have all the confidence in y'all that y'all get it done.
Thank you, man. Hey, I appreciate it for sure. Thank you.
Thank you for those who have chatted or who have tuned in. To anyone have a map, this is our first episode, and we have some more guests coming up next. So let's give a round of applause. We always do that at the end of our internship program. So round of applause to Adarious Payton.
Thank you.
Make sure to check him out and follow him and check them events out. All right. Bye.